Howard Nathan, for those of you who don't know him, I don't know if he doesn't know him, CEO of the Gift of Life Donor Program that we're part of, the Organ Procurement Organization. Good evening, Howard.
Hi.
We have a, yes you are. We have a trio meeting tonight where we have a panel of donor families who are sharing their experiences with communicating with their patients. And so we have a lot of anniversaries we're celebrating tonight.
Great.
And always, Howard seems to be coming or going when we have a meeting here, always stops in to say hello. Would you care to say anything to this illustrious group?
Do I have to stand in front of the camera?
I'm moving the camera to catch you, don't have to worry about
Well,
that.
thanks for doing that. That's a great idea. And we just had a great session all day today with critical care physicians and nurses from all over the area. It's like 100 people. And we brought in guests from out of town to talk about interactions with families, things that we've learned from you, it was really a great session. I mean, we had a national expert from Washington who headed national collaboratives and all that kind of stuff. And actually Sue McVeigh, Dylan, spoke representing donor families. Her son Michael was a donor in 1995, and the type of donation that occurred was not done before, and then nationally it began to happen more and more often. So anyhow, whose anniversary is it?
Well, we've had several close calls, but mine's today, and
Oh,
it'll be
mazel
23
tov.
years with this heart,
Yeah.
going into 24th year tomorrow. And it's been a great ride so far.
I'm 19 years with my kidney and pancreas.
Wow, that's cool.
And
Bob?
25 years with Sue's kidney.
Nice.
And the amazing thing is they've,
And Bob is 4 years with his
I'm 4 years.
kidney.
That's good. I guess transplant works.
that's the message.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen without the gifts. Thanks.
Yes.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for all you do, Howard. Very grateful.
I'm just a
There wouldn't be success without
conduit
you.
in the wheel.
a big,
He's
big
the hub in this
I was going to say, he's the hub, you're right.
He's the hub that keeps the spokes in line.
Yeah.
Well, the people upstairs are the ones who make it happen. The most important part is the conversation with the family and making sure that people get all the information they need to make an informed decision. And that's what we're teaching. It doesn't always happen that way. You get young physicians who are they heard a lecture that we gave and they want to just go out and talk about donation before a family even understands what happened. And it's just, the timing's wrong. So we're trying to teach people what that means. And we've been doing it for a long time, and every time it's like a new idea.
Well, it's working.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we're doing okay, knock on wood.
Yep.
And the guy I just talked to he's a, like second highest in Medicare, CMS.
Wow.
And he's in charge of quality improvement. And one of their major issues is drug overdoses and how to limit prescriptions. And we have someone here from Mainline Health who's the vice president of nursing who's on our board. And Mainline Health's one of the first in the city, in the region, to do something about it. They're basically limiting, through their electronic medical record system, limiting doctors to be able to give prescriptions on opioids in smaller doses. It used to be you get a 30-day prescription of opioid if you had surgery or dental work. Now it's 5 days. And if you want it again, you got to really beg for it. She says that it shows that you can be addicted in 5 days. And what they're trying to show people is that you can get just as much effect if you continuously take extra strength Tylenol or something like that. The problem is people take it and then they don't have any pain, and then by the time they take it again, they can't catch up. So people who took Tylenol and had the same effect as some of these people. So it's retraining people on how to think. It's a horrible thing. Yeah, for us, it's a double-edged sword. We can't change what happened. By the time we get involved, we can't change what happened. But we're trying to do something about it. We're trying to do these recovery walks, talk to some of the folks who are involved in counseling and that kind of thing. But it's a real sad thing. Real sad. 64,000 people died last year from drug overdoses. It's more than when we had, in 1972 was the peak of deaths from car accidents. Gunshot wounds, right? The peak was like 1992, 20,000 people died of gunshot wounds. You take those two, and it's still not as much as people died just last year from drug overdose. Peak car accidents and peak gun, I mean, the worst years. So it's very sad, and you know, our coordinators are out there every day. It's and I don't know everybody's story, but it's drug overdoses now. You know, most people, if you say who's an organ donor, you know, someone will say, oh, car accidents or a stroke or something like that. Drug overdoses is the #1 cause of organ donation in this country this year.
Wow.
That's how sad it is. And it's tripled over the last 3 years. Anyhow, for us, it's like a double-edged sword. We want to make sure families get the offer. And some people say, oh, it's a silver lining, which, you know, I'm not sure that helps much in terms of for the media part. You know, that's how the media portrays it. But you know, we have a social responsibility too to help stop it, even though we cut down on donors. Did you have a question?
No, I was waiting to.
Oh, you're waiting.
We're
Waiting,
waiting,
Bob.
Is there anything I can do with you?
Not at this point.
Okay.
They're going to be sharing their stories. And
Great.
Howard, maybe you could go back just a number of years ago when it was not encouraged to communicate with the recipient or donor family.
No, sure.
What changed and when did it change?
So, you know, I started almost 40 years ago, and it was basically the concept of the people who did transplants, surgeons, okay, who were responsible for doing the transplants, who felt that, you know, it was the kind of thing where they didn't think it was appropriate for recipients to meet donor families. And so that was the philosophy when I started, and it was carried through the transplant teams. As we, you know, began to get more sophisticated, if you will, and get more help, we would talk to social workers, and we had then gotten social workers here on staff part-time, which we didn't have when I was a coordinator. And they begin to say, well, no, people need that cathartic thing to be able to communicate to each other. And that's when we started, in about 1990. It was 2 social workers, Elizabeth Doolin and Eileen Glass. And they were actually, prior to that, for working for us, they were dialysis social workers. So they saw a lot of patients who were on dialysis and stuff at Pennsylvania Hospital. So it was about 1990 when we started to encourage communication between donors and recipients.
And do you have any sense what the I know this isn't your role, but do you have any sense of the volume per month here?
Right, last year we had 1,234 letter exchanges.
Wow.
Yeah, through Lara and her team. And that continues to grow. And it's not just like from recent things, you know, it's people who are out 8, 10, 12 years who are curious, either a recipient or, you know, some of the recipients write a letter right away. Some never write. Some say, oh, it took me 10 years to write. You know, so everybody's different, obviously. And it is disappointing to families when they may write a letter, but they don't hear back from any of the recipients. Yeah, that doesn't seem fair. Yeah, when you open the door for someone, they say thank you. You know, you go to Wawa, I go to Wawa for coffee every day, and everybody holds the door for you. You know, you can't walk into Wawa without people, thank you, that kind of thing. And yet you save somebody's life, and people don't know how to say thank you. So we've, I don't know if you know, but we have a little kit that we send all the recipients that are given out through the transplant coordinators. I don't know if you got one or not.
He was at
What
Johns
transplant
Hopkins.
here?
Oh, you were Hopkins, you didn't get one. We started that about 10 years ago to encourage volunteerism, but also to encourage the recipients to write donor families. And I think that significantly increased the volume. Usually it was 300 letters or so, and we started that, people started writing.
Are you finding that the people who may have written at some point, but then never heard, and they're writing again, and now it's 12 years, 10 years,
Yeah.
12 years, are they getting a response?
No, not always.
Well,
The other
it's never always, but
Yeah.
are they?
I can't answer that. Lara would be able to answer it better. But people might see something in the newspaper about a transplant, one of these living donor transplants, the chains, and it spurs something in people's heads, and that may spur them to write a letter to the donor, or vice versa, the donor to write to the recipient. But it's a personal thing, it's an individual thing. You don't know why people don't write. Maybe they were told by somebody, oh, you shouldn't write. I don't know, but we try to do the opposite of that. And it's been, I think, pretty cathartic for people to write.
And Howard, for the audience that's going to see this nationally, maybe you could explain the process. These people may know, we know, but the process by which a letter is passed on to a donor family such that they know what's in there and they're not shocked by it.
Yeah, what happens is some recipients will write to us directly. Some will give the letter to the coordinator, their coordinator at the transplant center, which, off the record, sometimes doesn't always get to us in a timely way. But people are busy. And they don't have someone, extra staff, to be able to handle this. We have someone, they're dedicated to handling these letters and stuff. That's all this one administrative assistant does with Lara. So sometimes it's delayed. Who knows, there may be some that we never get. I don't know that. So what happens is that at least at our recipient centers, we send this kit so that when they're discharged, it tells them about gift of life. We're the ones who help coordinate your transplant, and here's a model card that you can send to thank your donor family, and then some tips on that. And then they can send in also something to volunteer. So some of those we'll get directly, okay, here, and then we just forward them on to the recipient. They're reviewed by our team to make sure there's no identifiers, no last names, no phone numbers, no addresses. And even if they send a picture of themselves, and vice versa, if the donor family wants to share, we'll send that. But no names, no identifiers. Then over time, if people...
But let me stop you at that point, because
Okay.
what goes out to the donor family? It's an envelope within an envelope, right?
Yes,
And yeah,
yes,
well,
correct.
that's my point. People
Yeah.
don't know that.
It's a card in an envelope, and it may say to my recipient or to my donor family or something like that. And then we get it and we put it in another envelope saying, this was sent by your donor, and let us know if you'd like to write back, and we will send it to them.
So they don't open up the outside envelope and are surprised with what's in there,
No,
but rather...
it's a letter, cover
There
letter
you
from
go.
us,
That's my
on
point.
both sides, that says this was sent by the donor, or the donor family, or the recipient. So yeah, that happens a lot. And then the key is whether people continue to communicate. And some of you know that story, and meet the recipient, or many recipients, depending on the situation. And that absolutely did not happen years ago, 25 years ago. Just started happening around 1990-ish. I mean, occasionally we got letters back and forth, but up until then, until we had a system, it didn't happen that much, because it wasn't encouraged. So now, it's pretty frequent.
I'm often asked the question, my answer is less than 10% ever get to meet personally, but that's a number I just made up. Do you have any alternative number you'd say? How many actually donors and recipients actually meet? What percent?
Oh, it's less than that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what happens is, depending on, again, the person, some people will really pursue it, and they'll continue to write, to someone. And then the response is equally as important. And if they both say, I want to meet, blah, 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 and, Lara or her team sees that, and someone writes back and says the same thing, then that's when we, we'll say, okay, if you want to meet, we can arrange that kind of thing. But that doesn't happen a whole heck of a lot.
I always say there's so much publicity around the few that do, it seems like everybody does, and that's not the case at all.
Well, the other thing that's happened with social media is recipients try to find out about their donor, try to put pieces together. And, that's happened. We found out about it after the fact kind of thing. What are you gonna do? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
The key is what our job is to protect the privacy of both people. That's our obligation. And it's not until both people, the recipient family, donor family, say that this is something they want to do on their own. And, when we do the meetings, we typically have a release that we sign. But some of you have done it on your own, so that's okay. I'm not opposed to it at all, never was. I was just told what to do when I was a kid. So, but I think it's helpful now that we have professionals who deal with the situations and deal with families and that kind of thing. The other part of it is it's not always organs. So people who are tissue donors, which the majority of donors are tissue donors. Last year we had 2,800 people as tissue donors. 540 were organ donors, but 2,800 were cornea, bone, skin, heart valve, that kind of thing. And they're curious too, right? What happened to the bones? We tell them, it could go up to 100 people. And well, can you tell me where? Can you tell me who? That kind of thing. And honestly, for us, it is difficult because if you think about that, the numbers, 2,800 and as many as 100 transplants from one multi-tissue donor. It's thousands of people potentially just in 1 year, which is a great thing. And the tissue banks, one in particular, Musculoskeletal Transplant Foundation, which is the one we've worked on the longest, actually puts in the package of tissue a little card to the physician. When they open it, they then have it says, please let your recipient know that they received human bone, and that they have a thing called linking lives, and you can write to MTF. They would write it through their doctor, and then MTF would send it to us. And that's happening a little more than it happened in the past. In fact, when we have donor ceremonies every year, most of you have been there, most of the families there are tissue donor families. So we want to make sure that everybody understands it doesn't make a difference if you're a tissue donor versus an organ donor family. You're a donor family, period. And so that's important for people to know. It's equally as important.
Does anybody else have a question for Howard? If not, Howard, you just laid the foundation for a great meeting here. Thank you very much. I wish I could say we had planned this. We didn't.
Captain Gleason. See you later.
Thank you.
Never can tell what's going to happen here. Diane, I'm going to leave.